She called 4 times that afternoon. Nobody picked up. Nobody ever would again. The security camera, outside Crown and Glory Beauty Bar, recorded Maya Johnson walking through that door at 3:17 p.m. on October 15th, 2020. Her car was still in that parking lot at midnight. Maya was not in it. 12 years of friendship. $47,000. One message that said, "I know what you did." And a Tuesday in October that ended with Maya Johnson's body found behind the building she had paid for. This is what happened. And this is who did it. Stay with me. Because what you are about to hear is not a story about money. It is a story about what one woman decided was worth more than her best friend's life. Cleveland, Ohio, a city that has always demanded more from its people than it gives back and whose people have always delivered anyway. A city of double shifts and used cars and savings accounts built one disciplined dollar at a time. Maya Johnson was born here in 1987, third of 5 children. Her mother Gloria worked double shifts at a nursing home on the East Side. For 22 years, her father left when Maya was 7, what the record shows, what anyone who knew Maya will tell you before they tell you. Anything else is what she built after that. Maya did not grow up with financial safety. She built it herself from zero over a decade through the specific kind of discipline that most people admire from a distance, but very few practice in reality. By the time she was in her early 30s, working in healthcare administration at a mid-sized Cleveland hospital, Maya Johnson had $52,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account. She drove a used car she had bought outright. She packed her lunch every day. She had one streaming subscription and quietly felt guilty about it. Every time she received a raise, she increased her automatic savings transfer before she ever saw the extra money in her checking account. $52,000. To most people, that number means different things. To Maya, it meant something specific. It meant that if anything went wrong, her mother's health, a job loss, a crisis of any kind, she had a floor. She had built herself a floor, and she protected it with both hands. Then there was Denise Carter. They met freshman year of college, assigned as roommates by a housing algorithm with no way of knowing what it was setting in motion. From the first 2 weeks, people who knew them described the friendship the same way, inseparable. Maya was the anchor. Denise was the current. They balanced each other in the way that feels when you are young enough to believe in the word, like fate. Over 12 years, they showed up for everything: graduations, breakups, family emergencies, job offers, cross-town moves, hospital waiting rooms at 2 in the morning. If Maya's mother Gloria had a health scare, Denise was there without being asked. If Denise needed someone to stay on the phone at midnight when she was overwhelmed, Maya answered every time without exception. This was not a casual friendship. This was 12 years of real presence, real history. The specific intimacy of knowing someone so completely that you have stopped performing for them entirely. And Denise Carter was, there is no other word for it, gifted. She remembered everything, every detail you had mentioned once in passing, every name you had told her, every fear you had admitted to at the wrong hour of the night. She brought those things back at exactly the right moment. She made you feel, when her attention was on you, like you were the most important person in the room. That gift is real. It exists in genuinely generous people. It also exists in people with a different agenda entirely. And for 12 years, Maya Johnson could not tell the difference because she had never been given a reason to look. In the spring of 2019, Denise Carter called Maya with an energy she had not heard from her in a while, not the scattered, impulsive energy of someone chasing an idea, something slower, deliberate. She had been researching this for months, she said. She had walked the neighborhood. She had talked to suppliers. She had floor plans and projections and a name she had already designed a logo for Crown and Glory Beauty Bar, a full-service beauty supply. A natural hair braiding salon in a strip mall in a growing part of Cleveland. What she needed, the only thing standing between her and the thing that
supplier
was
quotes are locked in.
going
With the
to
projected
change
cash flow, we
everything,
break even
was
in 18 months. It's solid.
$47,000, first and last. On the commercial lease, build-out costs, initial inventory, 3 months of operating reserve, repayment in 18 months, 10% interest. Maya would put in $47,000 and walk away with $51,700. Then Denise said the 6 words that would cost Maya Johnson her life. She said, "We don't need paperwork, we're family." And Maya, who had spent her entire adult life
So
being
with
the
these
most
numbers, we're
careful
projecting a
person in
full
any room
ROI
she
within the
entered,
first 18 months. It's
looked
solid. What
across
do you
the
think?
table at the person she trusted most in the world and said, "Okay." In June of 2019, she wired $47,000 from her personal savings account, 10 years of packed lunches and used cars and saying no, directly into Denise Carter's personal checking account. The memo line read, "Business investment per our agreement." Maya typed that herself. She was not trying to protect herself. She was just being thorough, the way she always was. She did not know she was writing her own testimony. The salon opened in July of 2019. Grand opening Saturday, balloons. Deep discounts. Denise moving through the space like she had always
Glory!
meant to stand in it.
Yeah.
Maya was there, happy in the uncomplicated way. She did not think about the money that day. She thought about her best friend's face. That was the last fully uncomplicated moment in this story. By September, text messages were taking longer to get answers. By November, the repayment conversation was being gently redirected to next quarter. By March 2020, the pandemic shut non-essential businesses down, and Maya stopped pushing entirely. She gave grace because that was who she was, but here is what Maya did not know, what she could not have known. 4 months after receiving $47,000 in October of 2019, while the salon was still new, while their friendship appeared intact, Denise Carter had quietly registered a second LLC, a wholesale beauty and hair care distribution company, filed in a different county, under a slightly different version of her name, seated with $41,000 transferred from her personal account across 3 payments in July, August, and September of 2019, the exact months following Maya's wire transfer. The salon was real, but it was never the primary investment. The wholesale company, the one growing quietly in a warehouse Maya had never heard of, was where the real money was going. And it was profitable. By the following year, it had generated over $200,000 in revenue, not a dollar of which Maya Johnson had ever been told about, not a single dollar of which had ever moved in her direction. In August of 2020, Gloria Johnson had a cardiac event. Not fatal, but serious, a procedure, medication, monitoring costs that compounded quickly. And for the first time since she had wired that money in June of 2019, Maya felt the absence of $47,000 in a way that was physical. She needed some of it back, not all of it immediately, but something real. A plan, a date, a genuine conversation between 2 adults who had an agreement. She called Denise in September of 2020. She explained the situation the way she always explained things, calmly and without drama. She did not weaponize her mother's health. She simply told the truth. Denise was warm on the phone. She was always warm. She said she completely understood that she was going to look at the books that week and come back to Maya with a real plan. That phone call ended on what felt like solid ground. It was the last solid ground Maya would have. 11 days passed, no call, no text, then a short vague reply, then silence, then read receipts on messages that received no response. Then the 3 dots appearing on a screen, holding for 30 seconds, and vanishing without a word sent. Maya watched those dots disappear and felt a cold thread of something move through her. that she did not yet have full language for. She began doing what she had always done when something in her life needed to be understood. She went back to the documents. By 2 a.m, Maya Johnson had found the second company. She had found the LLC registration, dated October 14, 2019. She had found the capital transfer records. $41,000 moved from Denise's personal account in 3 payments beginning in July 2019, the month after Maya's wire transfer had arrived. She had placed those dates beside her own bank records and watched them line up in a way that left no room for alternative interpretation. Denise had not used Maya's money primarily to build the salon Maya had invested in. She had used it to quietly build a separate wholesale distribution company that Maya knew nothing about, had never been told about, and had never agreed to fund. A company that was, by that point, generating significant revenue. A company that Denise had never once mentioned in the 14 months since the transfer. In that moment, on the floor of her apartment at 2 a.m, surrounded by documents she had kept out of habit, Maya Johnson understood, completely and without remaining doubt, what had happened to her. She also understood something else. She understood that the message she was about to send would change things. She understood that in sending it, she was stepping into a confrontation that she could not unstep into. What Maya Johnson did not understand, what she had no way of knowing and no reason to anticipate, was that the person on the other end of that message had already, somewhere behind the warm eyes and the practiced smile, decided what the options were, and had begun deciding which one she was prepared to take. Before we go any further, pause for 1 second and let us know in the comments where you are watching this from tonight. We read every single one, and if this story is already stopping your breath, hit that subscribe button right now. We post every week. And what is coming in the next story will stay with you longer than this one. Stay right here, we are not done. On October 14th, 2020, Maya Johnson sent Denise Carter a message. It said, "I know about the wholesale company. I know where the money went. We need to talk. Call me today." The message was read within 4 minutes of being sent. No reply was sent, no call was made. The following morning, Maya told no one where she was going. She did not think she needed to. She had been to Crown and Glory Beauty Bar a dozen times. She knew Denise would be there. She knew the layout of the space. She knew the hours. She knew, she believed, the woman she was going to face. What Maya did not know was what that message had triggered, because Denise Carter had spent years operating in the specific gap between what people trusted and what they could prove. She had done it with Yvonne Harris 2 years before Maya, a $12,000 catering kitchen investment that evaporated without a paper trail and without consequence. She had done it before that with at least one other person whose name the full investigation has not yet made fully public. Each time, the absence of documentation had protected her. Each time, the warmth and the history had been enough to delay confrontation until it simply dissolved. But Maya Johnson had kept the folder. Maya Johnson had the wire confirmation and the voice notes and the text threads, and now she had the LLC registration and the capital transfer records. Maya Johnson was not going to dissolve, and Denise Carter, reading that message in the empty salon at night, understood that for the first time in her life, she was not going to be able to redirect this one. She was not going to be able to outlast it. The only question, the one she sat with through what remained of that night, was what she was prepared to do about it. Maya Johnson entered Crown and Glory Beauty Bar at 3:17 p.m. on October 15th, 2020. The exterior security camera of the strip mall recorded her entry. It did not record her exit. Her car did not move. At 11:23 p.m., a vehicle registered to a family member of Denise Carter's was recorded leaving the service lane at the rear of the building. At 7:52 the following morning, a delivery driver making his regular route to the strip mall found Maya Johnson's body at the rear of the building. She had been there since the previous afternoon. She was 33 years old. Detective Ray Coleman of the Cleveland Police Department, Homicide Division, was assigned to the case at 8:15 a.m. on October 16, 2020. He would say later, in a recorded interview that became part of the case record, that in 15 years in homicide, he had rarely arrived at a scene where the financial motive was this immediately and this completely documented, because Maya's folder existed, because Sandra Harris, the civil attorney Maya had been consulting, came forward within 24 hours of the missing persons report with the entirety of the financial record Maya had been building, and because the final message Maya had sent, "I know about the wholesale company," was sitting, read and unanswered, on a phone that investigators recovered from Maya's car in that parking lot. 4 minutes read, "No reply, motive." Documented by the victim herself in the last digital act of her life. Detective Coleman's investigation ran on 4 simultaneous tracks from the first 24 hours. Track 1, the security footage, the strip mall's exterior system had captured Maya's arrival and had captured no departure. Her car had not moved. The rear lane vehicle, registered to a family member of Denise Carter, had exited at 11:23 p.m. Track 2, Maya's phone record, and the final message, which gave Coleman what he described as the most clearly documented financial motive he had seen in 15 years. The message, the read receipt, the absence of any reply, the next morning's discovery. The sequence was unambiguous. Track 3, Carla Moore. Carla had already been in communication with Sandra Harris about the wholesale LLC when investigators reached her. She provided the document trail on the second company, the capital transfers, the LLC formation, the financial records, showing that $41,000 had moved from Denise's personal account into the wholesale company in the months immediately following Maya's wire transfer. Track 4, the forensic evidence recovered from the scene and from Denise Carter's vehicle, evidence the prosecution would describe as sufficient and specific. On October 23, 2020, 1 week after Maya's body was found, Detective Coleman presented the complete 4-track evidentiary package to the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. The prosecutor, Patricia Walsh, reviewed it the same day. Her response was immediate. She did not need more time. She had the motive, the timeline, the forensics, and the defendant's own digital record. She had everything. The arrest warrant was issued the following morning. Denise Carter was arrested on October 24, 2020. She was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Maya Johnson. She was additionally charged with civil fraud, wire fraud, and unlawful financial deception. Charges the prosecution described as essential to establishing the calculated, premeditated nature of the motive. At the time of her arrest, Crown and Glory Beauty Bar had been operating for 15 months. The wholesale distribution company, the one built with Maya's $47,000, the one Maya had spent a sleepless night uncovering, the one she had driven to that salon to confront, had generated over $200,000 in revenue. Not a dollar of it had ever reached Maya Johnson. Gloria Johnson received the news of her daughter's murder in the hallway of the same hospital where she had worked double shifts for 22 years. She had to be helped to a chair. She sat in that hallway for a long time before she could stand back up. The nursing staff who had worked beside her for 2 decades stood nearby but gave her space, understanding, the way people understand when someone has just been handed something no one can help carry. Maya's sister drove from across town and sat with Gloria through the rest of that night. They did not talk very much. Some things are too large for language, at least in the beginning. What they did, what they have done every day since, is say her name. Maya Johnson, a woman who worked hard and saved carefully and loved her. The news of Maya Johnson's murder moved through Cleveland the way news of that kind always moves. Fast and wrong at first, then slow and devastating once the full shape of it became clear. People who had known Maya through work, through church, through the neighborhood where she grew up, heard different versions of the story before they heard the true one. Some heard she had been robbed. Some heard it was random. Some heard a name they recognized and could not reconcile with what they were being told that name had done. Because that is the specific cruelty of a betrayal like this one. It does not only destroy the person at the center of it. It sends a shock through every person who loved both women, who had sat at the same table with both of them, who had watched them laugh together and believed what they were watching was real. And for many of those people, the question that would not leave them, the one that kept them up longer than grief alone would have, was not what Denise had done. It was how long she had been doing it. And whether anyone could have seen it, and whether they had been close enough to someone capable of this without ever knowing. That question, quiet and persistent and without a clean answer, is the one that changed things for a lot of people in Cleveland who thought they understood the world they were living in. Gloria Johnson identified her daughter's body on the morning of October 16, 2020. She was accompanied by Maya's youngest sister, Diane, and a victim services officer from the Cleveland Police Department, whose job it was to be present for moments that no training can fully prepare a person for. Gloria did not fall apart in the way that people sometimes expect mothers to fall apart. She was very still. She asked one question of the officer beside her. She asked whether Maya had been alone. And when the officer said they believed she had been, Gloria nodded once and did not ask anything else. She carried that information the way she had carried everything in her life, quietly and without putting it down. She went home. She sat in her kitchen. And at some point in the days that followed, she picked up the phone and called the people who needed to be called. She made the arrangements that needed to be made. She did what mothers do when the world asks them to do the impossible. She kept moving. Not because the grief was small, because the grief was so large that stopping inside it entirely was not something she could afford to do. There were still other children. There was still a life that needed to continue being lived even though the center had been removed from it. Maya Johnson's funeral was held on a Saturday morning in late October 2020. The pandemic had not ended. The restrictions on gatherings were still in place. So the people who loved her had to find ways to be present from a distance. Some sat in cars in the church parking lot listening through open windows. Some watched a live stream from apartments across the city. Some stood at the edges of the permitted gathering in masks in the cold October air, because being in the same physical space as the people who loved Maya felt necessary, even when the rules made it difficult. The church was not full the way it would have been in another year, but the love in it was full. That is what the people who were there said afterward, that the love in that room was so present it had weight. You could feel it pressing against the walls. A woman who had packed her lunch every day for 10 years and driven a used car and kept a folder and trusted her best friend with everything she had built deserved every single person who found a way to be there. And they were there. The case against Denise Carter moved into the pretrial phase through the winter of 2020 and into 2021. Defense attorney Mark Aldridge filed a series of motions challenging the admissibility of the voice note on the grounds that it had been obtained without explicit consent for legal use, challenging the evidentiary weight given to the security footage on the grounds that the rear vehicle's registration to a family member did not constitute direct placement of Denise at the scene, and filing a motion to suppress certain elements of the forensic report on procedural grounds. Each motion was argued before the judge. Each motion was denied. The evidence was solid. The record was solid. Patricia Walsh had built a case that was not going to be dismantled by procedural challenge because it had not been built carelessly. It had been built the way Maya Johnson did everything, carefully, completely, with both hands. Prosecutor Walsh spent 6 months preparing for trial. She interviewed Carla Moore 4 times. Not because Carla's account changed, but because Walsh wanted Carla to be so familiar with the experience of telling the truth in a formal setting that the courtroom would feel like the 4th time she had done it rather than the 1st. She worked with Detective Coleman on the presentation of the 4-track evidentiary structure, the security footage, the phone record, the document trail, the forensics, until the sequence was so clear and so connected that a jury could follow it without losing the thread even once. She prepared for every argument Mark Aldridge was likely to make and built a specific response to each one. She did not prepare to win. She prepared to make losing impossible. There is a difference, and Patricia Walsh understood it completely. The trial of Denise Carter began on a Monday morning in March of 2021. The courtroom was at limited capacity because of the ongoing pandemic restrictions, a detail that gave the proceedings a strange and specific quality. The formal gravity of a murder trial conducted in a half-empty room with masked faces and plexiglass dividers that made everyone look like they were participating in something both serious and unreal simultaneously. Gloria Johnson was there on the first day. She had a designated seat in the front row of the public gallery. She arrived before anyone else, and she sat very straight, and she did not look at Denise Carter when Denise was brought in. She looked at the judge. She looked at Patricia Walsh. She looked at the jury when they filed in. She looked at every face that was going to be part of deciding what happened next. She did not look at the woman who had been in her daughter's life for 12 years and in her kitchen on holidays and on the other end of the phone at 2 in the morning. She could not. Some things are beyond what a person can ask themselves to do, and Gloria Johnson had already been asked to do enough. Mark Aldridge's opening statement was by all accounts a technically accomplished piece of legal performance. He spoke for 40 minutes. He built a portrait of Denise Carter as an entrepreneur who had struggled through a pandemic, who had made financial decisions under impossible pressure, whose friendship with Maya Johnson had been real, and whose grief at Maya's death was also real. He acknowledged the financial dispute. He did not acknowledge the murder charge directly in the way Walsh expected him to. Instead, he planted a seed of reasonable doubt early, suggesting that the evidence connecting Denise specifically and personally to what happened at the rear of that building on October 15th was circumstantial, in ways the jury would need to examine carefully before reaching any conclusion. He was smooth. He was prepared. He was doing exactly what a skilled defense attorney does, making the difficult case sound less difficult than it was. Several jurors were watching him attentively. Gloria Johnson in the front row was also watching him attentively. Her expression did not change once during his 40 minutes. Patricia Walsh's opening statement lasted 22 minutes. She did not use notes. She stood at the podium, and she spoke directly to the jury in the plain, specific language of someone who does not need to dress up the truth, because the truth is already dressed. She said she was going to show them 4 tracks of evidence, and that by the time all 4 tracks were complete, the jury would not be in the position of having to decide what they believed. They would be in the position of acknowledging what the evidence had already decided for them. She said she was going to play them a recording. She said she was going to show them a parking lot. She said she was going to show them 2 companies, one Maya knew about and one Maya died for knowing about. And she said that at the end of it, all she was going to ask them to do one thing, not to punish Denise Carter for being a bad friend, not to punish her for a financial dispute, but to hold her accountable for the specific and calculated and documented decision she had made on the afternoon of October 15, 2020, in the rear of a building that had been built on another woman's savings. 22 minutes. No notes. Every juror was leaning forward by the time she finished. The first 2 days of testimony were technical. The forensic investigators presenting their findings, the financial analyst walking the jury through the capital transfer records, the bank representative confirming the wire transfer details. The kind of testimony that is essential and unglamorous, the structural foundation of a case that needs to be laid before anything else can stand on it. Mark Aldridge cross-examined each witness with the same strategy, probing for uncertainty, for margin of error, for any gap between what the evidence showed and what the prosecution claimed it meant. He found very little. The forensic investigators had been thorough. The financial records were unambiguous. The wire transfer had one memo line, and it said exactly what it said. There were no gaps wide enough to move a reasonable doubt through. On the 3rd day, Carla Moore took the stand. She had been prepared by Walsh over 6 months and 4 meetings, and she carried all of that preparation into the witness box with her without any of it being visible. She simply sat down and told the truth in the order it had happened. When she spoke, she looked at the jury, and her voice was steady, and her hands were folded on the railing in front of her, and she did not look at Denise Carter once during her entire testimony. Not once. She described meeting Denise in 2019. She described the wholesale company. She described what Denise had told her about the startup capital, that it came from a private investor who had agreed to a silent arrangement. She described the moment she understood that the investor had not agreed to any such thing and had not known the wholesale company existed. And she described why she had come forward. Not for herself, not for any personal resolution, but because a woman was dead and the record needed to be complete. Mark Aldridge cross-examined her for 90 minutes. He challenged her recollection. He suggested her testimony was motivated by her own financial grievances against Denise. He pointed to the settlement agreement she had signed releasing Denise from liability. And then Carla reached to the side of the witness stand and referenced her business journal, the plain composition notebook she had kept throughout the partnership, and Mark Aldridge paused for a fraction of a second that the entire courtroom registered. He had known about the journal. He had received it in discovery. But hearing Carla reference it from the stand in response to his challenge of her credibility was different from reading it in a discovery packet in his office. It made her real in a way that documents alone could not. The jury saw it. Gloria Johnson saw it from the front row. Patricia Walsh, seated at her table, did not react. She had known about the journal since month 1. The voice note was played on the 4th day of testimony. Patricia Walsh set up the audio player beside the jury box and she pressed play without preamble or setup. Just pressed play and let the room hear it. Denise Carter's voice filled the courtroom. Warm, specific. Referencing the amount, the terms, the timeline, the promise of repayment by spring. The recording ran for 47 seconds. The courtroom was completely still for all 47 of them. When it ended, Walsh did not immediately speak. She let the silence after the recording do the work that words would have done less efficiently. She looked at the jury. One juror in the second row had her pen down on her notepad. She had stopped writing and was simply listening with her full attention. An older man in the back row had his arms crossed and was looking at the floor in the way people look at the floor when something has just settled in them that they were trying to keep unsettled. Walsh waited the full silence out. Then she asked the audio technician to play it again. And it played again. 47 seconds. Denise Carter's own voice in a courtroom where she was on trial for murder. Her own words, the most devastating testimony against her that any witness could have provided. Denise Carter took the stand on the 5th day. She had spent 6 months preparing for this with Mark Aldridge, and it showed. Her composure was complete. Her answers were measured. Her demeanor was the specific calibration of someone who had rehearsed the version of themselves they wanted a jury to see and had arrived at something very close to perfect. She spoke about Maya with warmth. She spoke about the friendship with specificity, the details she remembered, the moments they had shared, the grief she said she felt at Maya's death. She was convincing in the way that she had always been convincing. It was the same gift that had worked in every room she had ever walked into, turned now in a murder trial toward 12 people who were trying to decide whether to believe her. She maintained her position on the financial arrangement. That the money had been a personal gift between close friends, that the voice note was a casual emotional expression and not a legal commitment, that the wholesale company had been an entirely separate venture with no connection to Maya's funds. She answered Walsh's cross-examination without breaking, without cracking, without giving Walsh a single visible opening to push through. She was to the last moment she sat in that witness box the most composed person in the room. And then Patricia Walsh asked her one final question. She asked Denise to look at the jury and tell them where she had been between 3:17 p.m. and 11:23 p.m. on October 15, 2020. Denise looked at the jury. She said she had been at the salon managing the close of the business day and had left through the front entrance before 9 p.m. Walsh said nothing. She walked back to her table. She picked up the security footage still, the parking lot at 11:23 p.m., Maya's car unmoved, the rear vehicle leaving the service lane. She placed it on the projector. She said no further questions, and she sat down. The jury deliberated for 2 days, not because the evidence was unclear, because murder is the most serious thing a jury is ever asked to decide, and the people in that room took that weight seriously and gave it the full measure of time it deserved. They asked to hear the voice note again on the first afternoon of deliberations. They asked to review the security footage stills. They asked for the capital transfer records and the LLC formation document. They were thorough. They were careful. On the second day at 3:41 in the afternoon, the foreperson sent word that they had reached a verdict. Gloria Johnson was in the courthouse when the notification came. She had been there every day of the trial. She had sat in the front row of the public gallery with her good coat on and her back straight and her eyes forward, and she had witnessed every moment of it. Maya's sister Diane was beside her. They walked back into the courtroom together. They sat down. Gloria folded her hands in her lap. The jury filed in. The foreperson, a woman in her late 40s who had not once during the trial allowed her expression to reveal which way she was going, stood with the verdict form in her hands. She looked at the judge. She looked at the form. She read, guilty, first-degree murder, guilty, civil fraud, guilty, wire fraud, guilty, unlawful financial deception. Gloria Johnson's hands in her lap tightened around each other once, then released. Diane reached over and placed her hand on top of her mother's. They sat like that and let the room continue around them. The procedural steps, the attorneys gathering papers, the judge setting a sentencing date, the ordinary machinery of a legal system completing its function. They sat in it quietly and let it finish. Then they walked out of the courtroom together into a hallway, and Diane put her arms around her mother and Gloria let herself be held. For a moment, just a moment. Then she straightened up. She had things to do. She still always had things to do. Denise Carter was sentenced 60 days after the verdict. The judge, in delivering the sentence, made a statement that the attorneys and observers present said was among the most pointed sentencing statements that courtroom had heard in years. The judge said that what made this case distinct from other cases of financial exploitation and violence was not the amount of money involved or even the specific brutality of the crime. It was the architecture of it, the years of built trust used as infrastructure, the 12 years of genuine friendship deployed as access, the patience of it. The judge said that the evidence showed not a person who had acted in desperation or in a moment of uncontrolled emotion, but a person who had made a series of rational, calculated decisions over an extended period of time, and who had, when those decisions were finally about to be exposed, made one final calculation that ended another woman's life. The judge said that the sentence being imposed was not only for what happened on October 15, 2020. It was for the full record. Denise Carter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom gallery, Gloria Johnson heard the sentence read. She did not cry. She had not cried in that courtroom on any of the days she had sat in it. She looked at the judge when the sentence was read and she nodded once. The small, specific nod of a woman acknowledging something that is true and real and still not enough, and also the only thing the system had to give. She picked up her bag. She put on her coat. She walked out of that courtroom for the last time. Outside on the courthouse steps, the October air was cold, the same October air it had been when this began a year before, and Gloria stood in it for a moment and looked at the street. People moving, cars passing. The city continuing its ordinary life around a woman who had just watched a court of law do everything it could for her daughter and understood completely, and without bitterness, that everything it could do was not the same as enough. Crown and Glory Beauty Bar closed the week after the verdict. The lease was not renewed. The retail wall that Maya had stood beside on grand opening day was cleared out. The styling stations were removed. The gold lettering was taken off the glass door. A process that left a faint adhesive outline of the letters on the glass for weeks afterward, visible if you stood at the right angle in the afternoon light. The strip mall filled the space with a new tenant by the following spring. The parking lot was repaved. The security camera that had recorded everything that mattered was replaced with a newer model. The ordinary world covered over the evidence of what had happened there with the same efficiency it always does. Life continuing. The way life always continues, regardless of what it has just witnessed. The wholesale distribution company, the one that had been built on $41,000 of Maya's $47,000 investment, the one that had generated over $200,000 in revenue that Maya never saw, was seized and dissolved by court order as part of the sentencing. The assets were liquidated. A portion of the proceeds were directed to Gloria Johnson as part of the civil judgment attached to the criminal conviction. It did not come close to replacing what Maya had lost. It did not come close to replacing Maya. Gloria accepted it the way she accepted everything. Quietly and without pretending it was more than it was. What we want to leave you with tonight is not the verdict, not the sentence, not the courtroom. What we want to leave you with is something smaller and more important than any of that. We want to leave you with a Tuesday morning in Cleveland. Maya Johnson waking up before her alarm, packing her lunch the way she always did, checking her savings account the way she always did, watching the number that she had spent a decade building dollar by careful dollar growing slightly from the week before, putting on her burgundy blouse, picking up her bag, walking out of an apartment she had paid for herself into a city she had grown up in and choosing as she did every day to show up fully to the life she was building. That woman, that specific, disciplined, loving, trusting woman, is who this story is about. Not the verdict, not the courtroom. Not even the betrayal as large as it was. Maya Johnson, who saved carefully and loved completely and kept the folder and walked into that salon on a Tuesday afternoon because she believed that 12 years of real friendship entitled her to a conversation. She was right. She was owed that conversation and everything that should have followed it. The fact that she did not get it is the thing we carry with us when we leave this room. And the fact that she kept the folder is the thing we carry with us when we walk into every room that comes after. Get it in writing. Tell someone where you are going. Trust carefully and document always. Not because the world is full of people like Denise Carter, but because the one time it matters, the paperwork is the only thing standing between a wrong and a remedy. Maya Johnson did everything right except one thing. She believed that love was enough to make documentation unnecessary. It was the only mistake she ever made, and it was the one that cost her everything. So for her, for Maya, get it in writing, every time. No exceptions. Rest well, Maya.
If this story stayed with you tonight, we need you to do 3 things right now. Share this video, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, and drop Maya's name in the comments.